Hi everyone, and welcome to ODTUG's online education series. Today's webinar is Apex World on Air, Recognizing and Preventing Security Threats in Apex Applications. This is part one of a two-part series, and presented by Dan McGhan, Joel Kallman, Juergen Schuster, and Scott Spendolini. This presentation will be recorded and available for viewing on the ODTUG website. Please feel free to put your questions in the questions box at any time during the presentation, and they will be addressed either during the webinar itself or a Q&A period at the end. So welcome, gentlemen. Thank you all for being here today.
Hello.
I really love this video, I must say. we put so much effort into it. I really love it. I still love it.
You're getting your money's worth now.
Welcome back to a new Apex World on Air show. Real quick today, because we haven't seen us for a long time, we now have over 2,970 users, so we're pretty close to 3,000, and more than 1,000 news. We just had the second birthday a couple of weeks ago, and we have more than 120 plugins, just the basic numbers. The on-air show is recorded and will be available on the ODTUG site or on our separate YouTube on-air channel. And this is it from my part. We have a two-part series all about security. Was the first working title, and Dan McGhan and Scott Spendolini are the experts there and show us security threats and how we're going to fix them. You can always ask questions. I try to monitor them. Everybody's trying to monitor them, and we try to fit them in whenever it's possible. Oh, now I have a lot of people in my list. Karen, can you put it over to Scott? Oh yeah, I can.
Alrighty, so you should be seeing a browser here.
I do.
Excellent. Yep. So we've got a lot to cover, and obviously if you've been paying attention to any news from any source, whether it's the newspaper or online, information technology security is of paramount importance. How many Mac users do we have that haven't run the patch yet, right? And by the patch, I mean a very critical flaw where if you go in and log in as root without a password, macOS High Sierra at least found that to be an acceptable event and lets you become root. Many of you probably also received some sort of credit protection complimentary subscription. Your name may have been part of the one of the several breaches that have occurred. There's probably going to be another one this week, and then another one next week, etc. So how does that impact us as Apex developers, right? And the answer is it's huge. We're building systems that are on the internet, on intranets, that are available to users who are good, bad, and everything in between. So we owe it to ourselves to make sure that what we do is done with security in mind from day one, not when we're done. And this is one of the key differences. If you build a 50-page app and then decide to spend an afternoon to secure it, you're not going to do a good job, right? You're going to be distracted, you're going to miss stuff, you're just simply not going to do as good a job had you done that since the inception of that project. So we're going to go through some things, some common knowledge I think I'll start out with. I'm going to throw it over to Dan in a little bit. He's going to talk about and do some demos of SQL injection in Apex and what it is. And then I'm going to finish up with some cross-site scripting demos. The thing that we wanted to do different when we came up with this topic is I've done hundreds of presentations. Most of them either have a component of security or focus on security. But the problem with that is you never really see an actual attack, right? Most of the stuff that I've done and that I've seen most other people do just shows, hey, turn this feature on, you'll be safe. Turn this feature on, you'll be okay. We're going to give you a different perspective today. We're going to show you what an attack actually looks like. And it'll probably change a lot of people's minds about how much time they're willing to put into security and when they actually start that process. So I wanted to start maybe just talking through 3 or 4 high-level features of Apex. Most people are going to find this relatively review, but there's a couple things here that I hope is new. And let's start out with authentication. This is really our first line of defense. Most people understand it. Most people have some sort of authentication event that provides you with either your credentials, or it ties into LDAP, it ties into some sort of single sign-on service. The key here, the recommendation here, is use what's called a federated model, or a centralized model. What this means is you shouldn't have 10 different types of authentication schemes all go into 10 different buckets of users. If you've got LDAP, if you have some sort of central authentication repository, that's really what you should point to. Yes, it's a little harder. Sometimes you need to figure out how to write that LDAP function, or how to integrate with a third-party solution like SiteMinder or Okta or something like that. But it's worth having everything in that centralized repository. The big difference there, and the big issue there, is that as users get added and removed from the company or the organization, they'll also be added and removed from Apex. So if you think about it, if you build your own custom user directory and people leave the company, who's maintaining that, right? Who's going to go in and remove those users from your Apex systems? Probably nobody. HR probably initiates some sort of workflow that kicks off and terminates your LDAP account, but it doesn't necessarily flow all the way to each individual Apex application. So it's a simple thing. It's more political, I think, with most clients that I work with, to get everything centralized, but it's definitely worth doing.
And that's supported now in the builder itself too, right?
Yes, exactly. So your Apex developers can actually become LDAP or be used to authenticate against an LDAP repository. It's a little bit more work to set that up, and I think right now, and Joel, if you don't mind chiming in, there is no support for a custom LDAP function, or is that something that's there and I haven't seen it, or is that something that's on the horizon?
No support for custom today.
Is that something you guys are looking at?
I think we'd rather have like OAuth and social authentication for the builder before custom.
Okay, interesting.
You see a lot of nodding.
But that is something that first of all, it's going to make your developer's life easier, right? So if you've got 5 workspaces, I've got 5 accounts now. And if I change the password on one, I change it on one, not all 5. So I prefer that. I prefer to have a single password and not have to worry about authenticating differently depending on which workspace I go to. Speaking of passwords, I want to show a quick demo here. This is a website from Steve Gibson, Gibson Research Corporation. He does a great podcast called Security Now. You can listen to it over on the Twit network, twit.tv. One of the things he talked about was password length and password complexity. And his theory, it's a proven theory, I guess, so his answer to this is it's not necessarily the complexity that you want to focus on, but it's really the length of the password. So here's a common password that we all probably use on dev, Oracle.
I'm going to use that one later.
I am too. So online attack, assuming that I can guess 1,000 times per second, it's going to take a couple days. Offline, if I get the password file, it's instantaneous. So we're taught to do this, right? ORACL3, bang. So I check all the boxes, but the offline fast attack scenario goes from insignificant to 11, 12 minutes perhaps. Still nothing that any dedicated hacker is going to be able to get past, right? What Steve says is basically just pad your password with a phrase, right? He uses periods, and I don't recommend you use that because that's the example he uses. But put a phrase here to make it 20 characters. And now look at the times, right? Even the massive cracking, some sort of state-sponsored attack, is 11.52 thousand trillion centuries. I can't comprehend that number. I know I'm not going to be here in that long. So that's not a bad way to pad your passwords. This is why a simple 8-character password, regardless of the complexity, is trivial to crack. And it's one thing that I always turn on, set it to 15 or 20 characters to truly put those passwords out of reach.
We should probably mention folks should be using a password manager, right?
Absolutely. Yep. I don't know 98%, 99% of my passwords. I literally don't know what they are. I know like iCloud, Dropbox, and my master password. I think those are the three that I could recall. Everything else is a 25-character generated random string.
Yeah, and maybe even dual factor, right?
And where two-factor is available, I will turn it on. Yep.
Hey, can I give a quick plug for 1Password? If you use a Mac, it syncs across all my devices. It's fantastic.
Yep.
I use it too.
Yep.
Me too.
Yep, I can vouch for that as well.
And thanks to Daniel, I can really use it. I didn't get it from the first time. How to synchronize offline. Because I don't want to synchronize over the cloud, just to synchronize the devices offline in a local Wi-Fi. It's possible. Not to the passwords in the cloud.
But the key there too, and again, I know it's a little tangent, but I think it's important to say why I use a different password per site. If there's a breach on site A and my password is Oracle, somebody is taking those credentials and just going to spread them wide, right? They're going to go to bankofamerica.com, capitalone.com, amazon.com, apple.com, and they're going to try those credentials over and over and over again. If I reuse that password, their chances of getting into another account go up tremendously. So that's why it's key to have completely different passwords for every site. Yes, it's hard. Security is hard. If it's easy, it's wrong. It's really that simple. Speaking of passwords, one thing I think every Apex developer needs to know is the login attempts report that sits over here inside the admin piece of Apex. This is going to show you all the different login attempts, including those that are unsuccessful, whether the username was unknown, the password is incorrect, the user's expired, etc. The problem with this report is it's a little deceiving because I can say show me 10 weeks. The problem though is Apex does not, they do not hold data by default past roughly 2 weeks because the logs will rotate and get overwritten. So as an Apex administrator, you've got to make sure that you're backing this up. And it's pretty easy to do. Run a job every night, capture yesterday's data, have the job kick off at midnight, and put that in a table somewhere else. If you don't have this data, you can't go look at it later. So if you do get audited, or if there was a breach, you simply won't have a record of anything prior to 2 weeks. Also, if you never look at this data, you'll never know if you've had a breach, or you'll never know if there's been an attempt. So this is something you need to build into your policies, is to have your security personnel or your DBA or somebody regularly inspect this data to see, have there been a lot of incorrect password attempts? Have there been a massive number of attempts from any specific IP address? Has there been a ton of invalid users where it looks like someone is just firing off perhaps a stolen cache of usernames and passwords at your system? If you're not looking, no one else is, trust me, right? This data just sits there and disappears. So put that into your process. Make sure that you're actually monitoring this table here. Okay, another piece of Apex here that's pretty important is the authorization schemes. So authorization schemes, think of them as roles. You create one, you can map it to pretty much anything in an Apex application, starting with the application itself and going all the way down to, say, a column or even an item. It is critical, though, that you actually create at least one of these authorization schemes and map it to your application. Because if you don't, any user in your LDAP directory could potentially access that application. I've been to a client where they didn't do that, and the look on their faces when I explained this to them was horrifying. They had built 20 or 30 Apex applications and had no central authorization schemes. So if any one of the employees simply changed the app ID from 100 to 101 and logged in with their valid credentials, they could see any application in the infrastructure. So you do need at least that one scheme that checks. One final note about the authorization schemes, there's a couple different points that you can put them on. And really the first two are the most common. Once per session is going to check all those authorization schemes when you log in. Once per page view is going to do a check per page view. This one's obviously more expensive. It's going to hit the database more often, making that check all the time. But this one allows you to revoke a role, and the next time that user clicks a page or does anything, that role is revoked. Where this one, the user's going to have to log in and log out. I prefer once per session, but requirements may dictate that you actually use the once per page view, depending on the level of security required for that application. Also, when you start going through your pages, it's critical to make sure that you have authorization schemes at the page level first. A lot of people will go through and secure a navigation menu item or secure a tab or secure a button, but neglect to do the page. So again, it's trivial for me to just come up here and change this from 4,500 to 2 or 3 or 5 and just explore the application to see which pages that I potentially don't have a navigation control to point me at, but I can still access. Not going to do a demo, but I do want to talk briefly about data access. This is really one of the most critical things that I see skipped time and time again, and it's securing your data at the database level. And I think at the end of today's webinar, when you see what we're able to do, people will start reconsidering this. Look into doing at least a secure view, if not VPD or label security, or some sort of tool that is provided through the Oracle database to lock your data down at the database. This basically makes the attacks Dan and I are going to demonstrate almost 100% useless. Because if I'm doing select star from table and then VPD is kicking in and saying, you're not an Apex developer, or you're not the right Apex developer, or your security context is set to this, you're only going to get some of the rows, and likely the rows you're supposed to see, not rows you're not supposed to see. So that's definitely something to look into, the VPD secure views, Oracle label security. VPD is free. It's a no-cost feature of the Enterprise Edition database. It is not available in editions below, like Standard 1, Standard 2, or XE. It's only in the Enterprise Edition.
And that's also going to work whether you use an Apex or any other application development framework, platform, whatever.
Yep. Thing is, if you do
Scott,
want... Go ahead, John.
Sorry, I just wanted to augment that as well, that the next generation VPD in the database is something called real application security.
Yep.
Oh, were you going to talk about that? I hope I'm not stealing your
time.
time.
No, I don't have time to.
Okay. Okay, that's it. Just so people know, it's also a feature of the database, and there is integration with Apex.
Right. You can integrate RAS directly with Apex, which is cool. Last thing, then I'm going to turn over to Dan here. My time's almost up. SSL. This seems like a no-brainer, and probably most of you on this call are saying that. Why would I not have SSL? I've been to places that don't have it on dev. And if you think about it, you're probably using a copy of prod for dev. You have sensitive data. It's being pushed all over the place on the network. And you're probably using the same credentials on dev that you're using on prod, or perhaps similar credentials. If you're not securing stuff over the wire, anybody who's maliciously listening for that internally or externally, if your site's on the internet, can see that data. Think about all the stuff in the cloud now, right? I mean, you've got to be, it's reckless to not consider using HTTPS with any site, right? To me, that's the default now. Don't even turn on port 80. It's a waste. Go right to 443, turn on SSL, and always leave it on. And last, we'll talk about this when we tie up here, runtime only mode. And I think a lot of people are going to reconsider using runtime only mode. What that does is it removes the Apex development environment from an instance of Apex. It absolutely makes things harder. You're no longer allowed to go into prod and make a quick tweak if your customer, or if you need it. You've got to go through the standard release management process. But like I said, I think you'll reconsider that decision in about 45 minutes. So with that, I'm going to toss it over to Dan. Wow, the whole list is here. There we go. And you should be good to go, Dan.
Cool. I'll just share my whole screen and hopefully folks will be able to see everything. So do you see my screen? Yeah?
Yeah.
Hopefully it's not too small. So I'll get logged into my local Apex instance where I have a little security demo I created. And I'm going to start by talking about session state protection and then work through a few SQL injection demos. But before I get into session state protection, I just kind of want to very briefly go over what it is we're talking about. Obviously, in this example here, we're looking at a report. This is data from the EMP table. And so we know, of course, that there's data in the database in a table called EMP, but also this data has been transferred up and into the browser and into the DOM, right? So this data is existing right now in two places that we know of, in the DOM and in the table. So if we map that out, we have the browser, DOM, and then we have the database, and maybe you have a custom schema, and that has a table called EMP. And so the data is transferred between these two, but there's actually another place the data goes through, and that's in the APEX schema. And there's two tables you should be aware of. One is sessions, and so when you log into the app, as I did a moment ago, there's a row that gets inserted into there, and there's another one, these aren't the real names, we'll call it item values. And so this is the go-between between the browser values and the table values. And so when we're talking about session state protection, what we're doing is protecting what gets into this table here, because that's terribly important, as we'll see here in a moment. All right. Also, I think Joel would appreciate it if I pointed out, to create this app, these demos, I actually had to go kind of like out of my way. And what I mean is, you know, Apex over the years has become more and more secure by default. It's hardened by default. So when you work with Apex these days, a lot of these vulnerabilities simply will never exist in your app. So there's two times where this can creep up. One is you're maintaining an older application that simply was created before the secure by default options were enabled. The other is you're creating an application of sufficient complexity where, yeah, you're coming down to lower levels. The higher level wizards aren't really sufficient for your needs, and so you're coming down to lower levels, you know, putting things together more manually where these securities can't kick in. Or you maybe adjust something you didn't know what exactly you were working with, and of course you expose yourself that way. So there's different ways this can happen. All right, let's get into session state protection. So what I have here is a report on employees, but we're actually not seeing all the employees. What we are seeing is a limited list of employees, because in this application we want to make sure that the users cannot edit the president or managers, right? So that's all we're seeing: analyst, clerk, and salesman. So when we drill in, of course they can manipulate this employee, and if you have an employee that looks in the URL, they might see that there's this sort of name-value pairing here, and they may decide to start manipulating that. So I think it's 7839, oops, I did that wrong, 78. Okay, this is King, and King is the president. So all of a sudden, with just a little bit of URL manipulation, I'm able to access somebody I shouldn't be able to. So if you go into your page level settings, you'll see that you have a security setting called Page Access Protection, and it's currently unrestricted. And if I just move this down to arguments must have a checksum, and we save this, rerun it, go back to the employees report, and now when we click a link, you'll notice that there's this checksum value here. And so if we manipulate the value as we did before, it doesn't matter what it is, we hit enter, we get this error, and it's saying, actually, no, you can't just change this. This page is protected. But what we could do still is point this to another page, like page 10, which is not protected, and then use 7839. Oops, let me remove this checksum. Okay, so now we've gotten to page 10, and we've set the value that way. So if I then go back to page 11 and simply don't pass any other parameters, well, now I'm back to King, right? So protecting the page is good, but it's not enough. What we're really concerned with here is the item itself. And so what we need to do is protect that item. So we'll come down to EMPNO, and you'll see that there is another setting here under security again, session state protection, and there's varying levels. Obviously, restricted is the most secure. You can't set it from the browser. You might use that from time to time. Checksum is one level down from that. We can set it from the browser, but it's going to require a checksum that's only good for this session. User means it's like a checksum that I could bookmark and reuse later. Application level means I can actually share it. I can email you the URL, the checksum, you could use it too, but you couldn't manipulate the values. And so if I go with session level and save this and rerun it, go back to employees, drill down. Now, if I try that same technique, we'll remove the checksum and set this to some new value and go over to page 10 again like we did before, which is unprotected. Now it's saying no, page 11 EMPNO is protected itself, so we can't get away with that trick anymore. Okay, cool. So we're secure, right? Scott, Joel, we're good?
Eh.
Right,
Until
so
someone builds another page, right, or switches that off because some JavaScript is breaking it. Sure.
maybe, right? If you created this manually yourself, and again, this is one of these options that's turned on by default now,
Yep.
but you got to know not to turn it off. So you have to understand that the item itself is actually in the DOM. So that's the let's see, we're on P11 here, EMPNO. We have this item right here, and what would happen if I said, 7839 here, and then I'm working with King, he's the president, don't want to change that, he doesn't have a manager, but let's say, we're going to give him just 1,000 and maybe change the date he was hired so he gets less vacation time. And we apply that, and action processed again, right? We're not seeing King here, but if I go look King up, sure enough, there's a manipulated record. So the last thing we need to do to really make sure that the session state is protected is come into this page, again, into that item, and we need to enable this here, which is value protected. And when we do that, and Apex renders the page, it's still here, but in addition to that, we have this new hidden item, which has a checksum based on the current value, and it ensures that if you manipulate this again and try to apply, it's going to say, no, you can't do that. When the page is submitted, the value has to be the same as when it was rendered. So now we're secure, and that's, I think, it on session state protection.
So a question from the chat here. Someone said, we're still using Apex 4.1. Okay. Plenty of people out there on previous releases. What is in 5 versus 4.1? If you created with the wizards what Dan just did with 4.1, it is far less secure than if you create the same exact page with the wizards with 5.1. So the same exact click flow is going to result in 2 different applications from a security point of view. So if you're using 4.1, you've got to add everything Dan did manually. If you're on 5.1, create the page and you're done. So most of what we're talking about, can go all the way back to Apex 1.5 or HTMLDB 1.5. Some of the newer features, session state protection, I think was introduced in 4.1. Correct me if I'm wrong, Joel.
No, it had to have been before that.
I think it's either 4.0 or 4.1.
Yeah, it came from Scott Spatafor, so
Yeah.
that tells you how far. It's a while ago.
Okay, maybe 2.0 then. It's been there, but it's not on by default in the older versions. It's only on by default, probably in 5.0 moving forward. So a lot of the stuff that you're missing it's not there, right? There's browser cache isn't there in 4.1 if you don't turn it on. Frame protection isn't there in earlier releases. That's been added in 4.2 and 5.0. So my recommendation.
If I may, yeah, I would just like to augment this a little bit, even beyond just what you can create in your base application. Any publicly disclosed vulnerabilities which are included in the Oracle critical patch updates, right? They're documented, and we, Oracle, say this is the least affected, version of it. So when the critical patch updates come out, there's no patch that fixes some of these vulnerabilities in Apex 4.2. you always need to adopt the latest version of Apex or the PAT-SET. So just the underlying framework itself may have vulnerabilities in it.
But I will say that the framework goes so far in being secure by default. You know, a lot of folks are aware that over the last few years I've been spending more time in the node world where, you know, you're at a lower level and building things up, and it is so much easier to make mistakes at that level because you don't have the framework helping you and with all these secure by default options. So, you know, kudos to Apex for that.
I mean, Danny and I had to go out of our way to break the app.
Yeah, exactly.
Today, right?
All right, so let's move on. We're looking at SQL injection number 1 here, and what I have is a report, and I've put a button in it to make it really easy just to let employees know they're doing a great job. And the way it works, you click the button, you get a little prompt, are you sure they've done a great job? You hit OK, and it says email sent. So they're happy that you've given them some props, right? So how did I go about implementing this? Well, first in the report, I added a button and brought in empno. And note that empno is mapped to a property in the HTML button called data-empno. It's an HTML5 kind of thing, so we can get some actual data relative to the row. And then I created a dynamic action so that when that button is clicked, we first do a confirm, and then we have a little JavaScript here that gets the button that was clicked and maps its data empno property to a variable called empno. And then I use $S here to set the value of a hidden item on the page, P1 empno, to that value. So it's for that employee, and then we run this PL SQL block here.
Can you,
so
Dan, can you enlarge the screen a little bit? I just see a fraction.
Can I?
Tiny version. I mean, now we had the application builder and the editor side by side, and now you have just one half of it.
Yeah.
So
did it get smaller?
So you should have at least another part of the screen. So it's just this one.
Yeah, I would have to. Not so sure I can do that on the fly. What I can do, here's what I'll do. I'll copy this out, and I'll go back to showing 2 screens. And I'll just show the code in a separate window. I should have set my browser or my resolution a little bit lower. But we can go back to the JavaScript real quick. And I'll just show you that first. So, right, can you see this? Is this better?
Yeah.
Okay. So, yeah, I'm just getting from the triggering element, that shouldn't have a space, the value of data, mapping that to a variable, and then setting the hidden item in the page. And then we can go to the PL SQL code, which is going to declare an emprec, and it's going to fetch the value for emprec based on the empno, and then use Apex Mail to send that employee a message that they're doing some great work, right? So have any of our panelists spotted my problem here?
I think I might see it.
Yeah. So it's the syntax I'm using to get at the value in session state. I'm using the substitution variable syntax in a place where I should never use substitution variable syntax, which is in SQL and PL SQL code. And so what happens when we do that, we've kind of like opened things up in a way we probably didn't expect. So again, if I inspect this page, and we're looking at this data empno, what I can do is just start manipulating values. So maybe I add a single quote, and then I try anything I like. And so then when I click that button, now we're getting an error. And this is the first sign that we may have a SQL injection vulnerability. This is telling me SQL command not properly ended. Okay, so what I could do then is start playing a little bit more. And eventually, all it really takes, and I'm just going to speed this up with a little copy paste, is something this simple. So I'll go back in. Oops. See the button. And I'll paste this in, and all it says is execute immediate. So I'm ending the previous statement, and then I'm saying execute immediate, drop table, OEHR countries. Cool. So we'll click it. And I get another error. This error is really scary, though. It says, unique primary key, in table referenced by foreign keys. And so basically, the only reason that this drop table did not go through and execute was because of a foreign key constraint that saved it from doing so. So I could, of course, if I knew the right tables, I could start at the lower levels and just work my way up, deleting tables as I go. But you may be thinking, oh, well, you'll never get those table names. You can't do this kind of attack. That's not exactly true if you open yourself up to these kinds of attacks. So let's move on to SQL injection number 2. So what I have here is a report on employees, and this is a custom report. Oh, by the way, the SQL injection, the fix for that, I should say, here is quite simple. All we really need to do is change this to the correct bind variable syntax. So if I move this into the text editor, this is what the query should look like. I want to make sure I point out the fix for that before I move on. Okay, so let's
Dan, can I explain, Carsten explained me why this is the right thing to do. So the difference is that the optimizer is passing now the SQL query without the bind variable. So, and if you, and after that, it just brings in the bind variable values. But if you have the other syntax, the optimizer also already passes everything as the SQL statement. So,
right.
If you would now do this attack, the SQL statement would simply not be valid because it's not on pass time.
Yeah. So exactly. So let's move on. I think I'm running short on time. What time did I need to end these demos?
Probably 2 minutes. Take it.
All right. So
can you Command plus to make your browser a little bigger and get a couple messages from folks? That'll help.
Is that better?
Yeah.
Okay. So can't really see that. There we go. Compromise. All right. So the next thing in this demo, I'll show you how it was put together. So we have a region here, which is a classic report based on a function. And when you see this kind of thing in Apex, it's great because it's super powerful and flexible. It allows us to did I just lose my source? Let's undo that. It allows us to do something like this, where we can build up a query as a string, append in only what's needed, and then return that query out and have the Apex engine executed. The problem is that if you don't know what you're doing, you can open yourself up to vulnerabilities. And so note here that I am, in fact, using bind variable syntax. And still, as I'll show you, we're not safe. So if I run this page and we search on just E, we get all the E's back. But if I end it and then say union, select, let's say, star from dual where dummy like, and end that, it says, okay, now the query block has the incorrect number of result columns. So what's happening in our union, I just don't have the right number of values. So if we run this again, I see 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 columns, the number column first. So what I'll do is I'll change my union query. I'll say, okay, null for number. Then I have some string values. So I'm going to say, give me the owner and then the table name. And then I need, if that's 3, I need null, 4, null, 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 and null. I think that's right. And I'm going to pull that from all tables. Oop, got to get rid of my dummy. So we'll just say where table name, like, got to spell table right. So now you'll see we're getting owners and table names back. Once I start to get to the data dictionary, then I can identify the targets, such as mtable, and then I can, of course, do the same kinds of things on those tables. And now you're getting at the heart of what SQL injection really is and how, you know, people that use it are able to get data out of companies, oftentimes without them knowing until it's too late. So I'm out of time for number 3. I'm just going to say really quickly that sometimes you're doing something, well, gosh, I got to say, the fix for that, by the way, is to properly parameterize a where clause. So let me address the fix for this one. So rather than use this, you know, classic report based on a function, I could have done a regular classic report and just parameterize my where clause with something like this. And so now I'm saying P2 name is null, that returns all rows, or it'll apply this logic. And when we do it like this, it's essentially the same as what we had before, only this version is not open to that SQL injection vulnerability. It simply binds incorrectly and we get no rows coming back.
If you have to do the function, just make sure that you include :P2 item name in your string. Don't evaluate it outside of the string. So if you return it, again, you've got to like picture in your mind what's Apex going to do to execute what's returned from the function. And if that says select star from emp where empno equals :P2 empno, you're going to be okay.
Yeah. When you have the function, it's a 2-step process. First, at PL SQL to get the query, then to execute the query. So you need the bind variables in that second step.
That's right. Okay,
so this last one just is kind of playing out. Sometimes you're building applications, and these are actually really fun to build where they're super flexible, and you're like, all right, well, we're going to allow users to kind of mine their own data and do this kind of dynamic stuff. And it's great that Apex allows you to do this. You just have to be really careful when you do it. The way that this one was put together, again, I'm using this report based on a function, and if we look at the code, it has, you know, I'm going to the columns item, and I'm looping over that to build up a select from columns, and then we append the from and then the table item, right? Now, this is super cool and great, but you just have to be careful the way you do this. And sometimes you need the flexibility, you just need to do sanitization. So what we could do here is ensure before we trust the value from, you know, an end user essentially, that it's in a predetermined list, and if not, we raise an error. And in some cases, like the columns, maybe that's just too many, so that's like we don't want to have a predetermined list. That's fine too. That's where you get into using APEX-SERT. And so what we could do in this loop here is at least say, rather than bring in the column name as a trusted value, we could instead say, you know what, simple SQL name will ensure that it is in fact, according to Oracle naming conventions, you know, 30 characters, maybe different in 12CR2, but, you know, no single quotes, this kind of stuff. It'll make sure that it is valid, and if not, it'll raise an error. Now this can run without opening us up to SQL injection. If we have time in the end, I'll do a really scary demo that shows that you don't always have to know what you're doing. Like you're seeing me do these unions and whatnot, and you may be thinking, oh, well, I work in a company that doesn't allow folks to access these apps from the outside world. So, you know, just folks working in my company, it's a small company, and they don't know how to do SQL injection. That's not necessarily true, and I'll show you why if we have time at the end. Pass it back over to Scott.
All right, so let's talk a little bit about cross-site scripting here. I'm going to go ahead and log back in with the right password, of course. Come on. Okay. So common request, you've got a report, you've got address 1, address 2. Let's put that on the same line, but let's drop it down. So if this here, the suite 100 should be in this field, but right below that. So pretty easy to do. Let me just make sure I'm authenticated here still, and I am. So let's grab the report, and we can just kind of put the BR here in place and bring this up a line, and we can just call this address, right? Looks good. We'll go ahead and save and then reload this page. And there it is. Let's bring it all the way up, put it right before city where it belongs. And we'll save this as our default report, so all our users will be happy. But notice, again, Apex by default says that's not a good idea. It's escaping the actual BR and rendering it in line. So the HTML isn't being interpreted here, nor would any JavaScript code that I inject into this page be interpreted here. But here's where people go wrong, is they look at this and say, what can I do to make that not do what it's doing right now? And they'll edit the page, and they'll go to the column, and they'll start tinkering with things, and they end up down here where this escape special characters toggle switch is enabled. They'll turn it off, and then they run their report, and it's like, perfect, that's it, I've got it. Hey everybody, what do you think? My report looks pretty good, doesn't it? Again, they went out of their way to enable Apex to be susceptible to a cross-site scripting attack. On the box, Apex wouldn't do this. So let's go through the first attack here. If I edit the page, and all I'm going to do is paste in a reference to a script file here. It's on a server I call Cloud. It's just a server in the Amazon cloud. I'm running here on my local instance on a VM. So I don't have to respect any rules that may have been set up by the DBA by way of access control list or the firewall or anything like that. As long as I can get to this Amazon site, a publicly available site, I can include this little file on the page. Before I do that, let me go look over here on Cloud and log back into this simple application here. Gave it a different color so we could tell them apart. This is a simple app on a table that sits on the cloud server. And right now there's nothing at all in this table. As soon as I save my record here and then I reload the report, that JavaScript actually executed. And if we looked at the inspection under network here, do that again, you can see that there's actually a couple calls to this data. And if we expand the inspection panel, you can see that I passed in hello world as a value in this network call. And then in this network call, I passed in 309-3541. Well, the 309-3541 is pretty obvious. That's the account ID on this page. So that's the value of a page item. But where the heck is hello world? Where's that coming from? If we look at the page source, I have a page 0 item that's hidden that has session state set to the words hello world. So items that are displayed, page 0 items, any item in the DOM is basically susceptible. And if I reload my application over here, I now have the values of those items stored on a completely different server that I can access anytime I want. Because this is what's called a persistent attack, anytime any user logs in and the John Dulles row is displayed, it'll trigger that attack. So think about what Dan had with VPD or with the where clause. Maybe I only see people that report to me, but when my manager logs in, he sees everybody, including John Dulles. So that cross-site scripting attack gets triggered, the entire, or any account ID or any page 0 item that he has set, which may be very different. A lot of people I see, they use page 0 for an internal user ID or some sort of control or session type value. Because that's in the page, it's pretty trivial for me to grab that and send it out. So if we take a look at the script that's running, it's not the most complicated JavaScript. The most sophisticated piece is probably the sleep function, which I had to copy from the internet here. We need some time for the whole page to build before it can go grab these items. Once it's done, so half a second later, we're basically creating a new request. We're calling the server in the cloud, and it's basically just an ORDS web service. and then I'm passing in p-val, document get element by ID, p0 item, and then I'm doing the same thing for p1 account ID. So it's, like I said, not the most sophisticated attack, but it's a pretty dangerous one. Let me go back over here and show you the web service called Capture Data.
You're using ORG to help you hack Apex.
Yeah. P values, bind variable p value. That's it. So that's how you grab page items. What if I want to grab the whole report, though? Right? Could I do that? Absolutely. I could change this page item to ir.js and reload the page here. And if I go back to my little capture tool, let's clear it out first and redo it. And hit go. You can see every row from that table. You've got to parse it out, and I could have probably written, CSV, and I could have imported it a little bit easier. But you could see the names of the customers. You could see the addresses. If you're familiar with the sample database app, you should recognize all this stuff here. All that data has been sent across the line, and now I have it. So a slightly different way to do this. Dan helped me construct this one where we're basically just finding the table based on the class, and then looping through the table, assembling the value, and then basically sending that out in a similar fashion that we did the last one for.
There's a question in the queue. Would normal PC security like Norton or Malwarebytes prevent this type of attack?
No. The browser doesn't see this any differently than if you go take a look at the page and it's just including another JavaScript type application, right? So it's just saying, oh, hey, you're a script file, let me include you too. Now, if you had a firewall that prohibited access to external domains, that would prevent this from happening. It wouldn't prevent the fact that if this were a big enough field, I could dump it in here. I just did it this way because it's convenient. But if this field were varchar 4000, I could probably get all of my little scripts here embedded in the item itself. So in that case, then no, it wouldn't help at all. Now, my favorite one is data grids, because these are the easiest. Because what data grids do is actually use a JSON file as their source. So if I purge this out again, and let's take a look at the source of this page, when you turn lazy loading on, you can see that Apex already did all the work for you. It's pretty easy to just grab this component and shove that across the line. So again, I'm just going to reload the page, and then when I go over here and hit go, I've got a JSON document that was part of the source of my data grid on the previous page. Now, if it's not lazy loading, I just didn't have time to figure out how to do that. It can be done. It's just a matter of sitting down and doing it.
Now you can use the new JSON capabilities of Oracle to mine that easier.
Absolutely, yeah. If this were 12C, I could have done Apex JSON table and made it a lot easier for me to read. But I can just pop this over into Sublime, right, and paste it in there and format it. Why is it not working? Anyway, it works. It's just not working for me.
Live demo.
Yep. So that's, in a nutshell, what you could do with a cross-site scripting attack. And I've never thought to take the time to do this. I did it over the Thanksgiving week, and yeah, it didn't take a lot of work to figure out how to go ahead and read what's going on and use some real basic JavaScript to basically push stuff across to another server.
You mind if I show one last demo?
Well, I've got one more, and I'll let you go, because I think we're going to do with the two bombs, right?
Yeah.
So we mentioned why you should never develop in production, and I'm going to prove to you why that's true with apexproc.js. Before I do that, let's take a look at this application that I'm working with right now. I want to show you on page 1, there's nothing in the pre-rendering besides this static value for account ID. I'll hit go just to show you that it's not making this up. On page 101, there's only 3 processes. This is the standard stuff that Apex puts in. I'm now going to save this report, run it. Whoops. And if I reload this page, I've got a new process that creates a password table. Execute immediate, create table C or T with 2 columns. If it's there, it just went others than null, right? Great form in PL SQL, but in this case, it's using it to our benefit. I've got a process here, which I'll let you figure out what it does and why it's written like that. But you can see that it prints usernames and passwords. This one's even restricted to only fire if I'm the admin user or whatever user I want it to be. And in order to capture all the passwords and the usernames, I had to add a process over here called steal username and password, which sits right in between login and clear page cache that inserts into T the values, username and password. So if I go back down and look at my data field here, which is select star on T, I see nothing until I log in. And now I've got demo, username and password showing up in this table. Now, clearly there's not going to be a report in Apex written on that. So if I go back and view the source of page 1 and look for the word demo, it's not going to work unless I'm admin. Hang on one second. And I forgot my admin password. Hang on.
It's Oracle.
I know. I thought I said it's Oracle, and I no, I didn't, because it doesn't let me do Oracle. I'll make it.
Scott, did you insert a process in the application builder? Did I get this right?
I certainly did. I did 3 processes.
He used the Apex APIs to add processes.
Ah, okay.
That did scary things.
Mm-hmm.
So now if I view the page source and I search for Sumner, which is my password, you can see it's bringing it twice because it got injected in there twice. But I could just come back here in a day or 2 or a week or 2 or a month or 2 and collect all the passwords.
Cool. So there was a question in the queue. I'm going to switch it back over to me.
Okay.
You know, how do you protect against cross-site scripting? And it's all about sanitizing values from users when they go into your database as well as when they come out, perhaps more importantly when they come out, but you can do it both ways. And really, that's a good lead into next week's, or I'm sorry, not next week's, but the next talk we're going to do on security. We're going to talk about tools that you can use to help prevent this kind of stuff then, so make sure you attend that.
Yeah, I want to thank Nathan. I saw Nathan do this at Kscope. He didn't show you how to do it, so I had to sit down this weekend and kind of figure out a couple ways to get this done, but he did demonstrate something very similar. I think he was calling an LDAP server rather than storing it in a local table, but either way, I can do anything, right? Anybody can do anything. You can print a picture if you want.
Yeah. All right, so here, I just want to show you, all you got to do is Google SQL injection tool. First thing that comes up is called SQL map. Conveniently enough, it's open source and on GitHub. And all it takes to run it is Python, and then you can do a git clone, and then just run it with Python. And what I have here is a command that's based on the one behind here, but I'm using a lot of the options for SQL map. So here the URL is an Apex URL, not as you might normally see it, but the instance, I do need the app session. And then the other thing that's a little tricky is you got to use this cookie flag here, but once you get those in, you can tell it, okay, I want the database banner, I want the users, I want the privileges, I want the tables, and so on. And let me put in the correct values, and then we'll grab that, bring it over to the command line, paste it in, and run it. And you'll see what it's doing is going to town. I went back to that page 2 that I secured using a parameterized where clause. I set the code back to the unsecure version of the code. And so this is the part that takes the most time. I did tell it to go ahead and query. So when this finishes, though, what it's doing behind the scenes is just hammering the database with all kinds of different union attacks, like the one you saw me generate. And you can even see a few of those up above here. You know, this is the kind of stuff it's throwing at it. But here we have users, we have privileges, and we have tables, all without knowing a single thing about SQL injection. So definitely something folks need to watch out for, even if you think you're safe, or people don't know it in your org. May not be true.
Yeah, so to finish the question that I saw about mine, how do I prevent that? Well, turn escaping on, right? I had to go out of my way to make the application susceptible. The way that you should properly write this report is really for a couple reasons. One, for performance. You really never want HTML inside your SQL, but what you should do is have two different columns here. And then what you could do is have a null column called address.
We don't see your screen, Scott.
Oh, yeah, we're just looking at you.
Which is nice too.
No, it's not. No one wants that. So previously, what we had here, let me go ahead and reload this page. What led to this was me putting this HTML snippet inside the query. So ideally, what you would do is put the query back the way it was, and then go into the first column, right? So customer street address 1. I'm just going to copy this, and then under HTML expression, put this, and then do cust street address 2 after it. So what this is going to do is make sure that anything in here that you've typed gets rendered as HTML, but it's going to escape any values that are included in either one of those two columns. And then we have to make sure that escape special characters is on. Since we don't need 2, we need it in our query to get the value of it. I could set it to a hidden column, though, and then just change the label to this back to address. And now when we run this page, you can see over here, it's doing it correctly where there's not an injected cross-site scripting attack, but it's basically rendering my attack harmless now and also dropping it down to the next level. So that's the proper way to do it. Here's the problem. In Apex 4 and maybe even 4.1, you couldn't do that with IRs. So what most people probably did was what I did. So you open yourself up to this. Now with 5.0 and 5.1, you can do this with interactive reports. So if you have done it in the past, you got to go through and kind of fix it.
Yep. We're over time, so let's let Juergen wrap up, and then I'm open to staying a little longer. If folks have questions, I see there's some in the queue, so that the other folks can take off. I'll hang out. But Juergen, go ahead and wrap up for the folks that do want to leave.
What I want to say is, now don't let yourself mislead that we have Apex vulnerabilities here. So what we are talking here is web attacks. Apex is creating a web application, and from there, all the web applications vulnerabilities are also applicable to Apex, right? We have a web application, and the good thing is Apex provides us a lot of tools in the framework that we can easily fix these issues, or it even gets better version after version that you don't even run into it. But even if you know it, and in 2 weeks we will see the tools that show us where the vulnerabilities are, and there's always a fix for that. So that's the good news. These are none what we have seen has anything to do with Apex. It has all to do with database and web applications. And
Apex is far more secure than most other tools folks are using, like Angular and all that. A lot of this stuff just doesn't exist. It's a far more manual. There's no secure by default, that kind of stuff.
Because I always get encountered myself that people say, oh, Apex is insecure. What? Apex is nothing, right? It's just, we talk, your web application is insecure. Of course it is. Or your database is insecure, yes, but Apex doesn't do anything. It only helps you to fix these issues. Every web application has, or any database application has. So don't mislead yourself that we're talking here about Apex issues, which you wouldn't have with any other development tool. This is all I want to say. So Dan, and thanks.
Just a reminder, you come next to the next session where we're going to cover how you fix all this stuff and keep it fixed.
More detail. Yep. Yeah. And we'll have folks from Rex on the next session too, right? As guests.
Yeah.
They'll talk about some of their tools to help remedy this as well. Because I agree, Juergen. It's Apex by default. If you don't go in and mess around with it, is a very, very secure platform. However, the reality is we all go in and mess around with it. So we owe it to ourselves to know every little bit about what we do, and seemingly innocent little things like adding a BR to a report opens up a vector for literally all kinds of attacks. And I guess that's the other thing too that's really important to understand. I'm not opening up a vector for a specific cross-site scripting attack, and Dan didn't open up a vector for a specific SQL injection attack. We open up vectors for any attack. The attacks are limited to the creativity of the attacker. So that's what makes this so important. It's not like I can only see one column or one report with this flaw. I can do whatever I want. And as I probably should have kept the research and all the stuff I did, because when I started doing this, I was adding reports to the page, and the problem is it was just too hard to set the default templates, because then the report showed up, and if something shows up, now you know it's there. Someone's going to report it as a bug. So I flipped back over and said, you know what, I'll just do a process and spit out HTML. All I want are the passwords. They don't have to be pretty, because once I get those, I can see everything.
Cool. So thanks for coming, everybody. We'll see you next time. And for those that want to see some answers to questions or ask some, we'll stick around for a few more minutes. Thanks again.
Yeah, we've got a bunch of people on the line here, so I'm happy to go through them as well.
So one of them, it was related to your AJAX attack. You know, I thought you wouldn't be able to send XML HTTP requests outside of the domain without CORS enabled. And, you know, it's funny, when Scott first showed me that attack, I thought the same thing. I'm like, wait a second, how is this even working? And then he showed me the network communication, and sure enough, the attacker, Scott, was kind enough to enable CORS for that to work. So when you think about it, it's actually quite easy for any attacker doing this to just enable CORS, no problem.
Yep.
I have a question for Scott and Dan, if you don't mind.
Yep.
Is there a threshold of how many, let's say, cross-site scripting attacks are acceptable? If I have 5 or 10, is that, what should I shoot for? Is 5 okay, but 10's worse?
I mean, vulnerabilities?
Yeah.
No, none, right? I mean, ideally none. Because one is infinite. You know, if you've got one little place, if there's one report, now it's also, you have to be pragmatic about it. If I find a cross-site scripting flaw on a very seldomly used page buried deep inside the application, there might not be much I can do with that, because no one's going to view that page. But if it's something like a customer list or a support forum or things that are going to be viewed by multiple people, then yeah, they get to be much more important, much more critical.
And then the tools that we're going to...
I was trying to serve that up there. That was more of a rhetorical question. That some people say, well, I only have 1 or 2. Yeah. The only answer is 0, right?
Yeah, exactly.
It's like having a small window open in your totally secure house. So even if the window is very small, nobody cares, right? If you say, okay, everything is pretty secure, but this little window in the cellar, somebody can get in and do everything.
All right, so let's hit some of these questions. Is there any Oracle table that stores audit info, or is that only through native Oracle auditing? Little vague on that, but I mean, you can turn on auditing and audit stuff. You can build your own auditing. I've seen that done many different ways and times. It's on you though, right? It's 100% on you as to what you determine appropriate for each application, and it'll vary. Some you'll want lots of auditing, others you'll want none. Do you guys want to add anything to that?
No, Nathan was adding something to your previous attack. If you want people to view your page, just send them an email.
Not true, exactly. We talked about the 4.1. Do you have to change, so back when, Dan, you were doing your SQL injection stuff, do you have to change the setting at each item for security? Yeah, any item you want to protect, you've got to do that.
We should mention in the shared components under session state protection, there's a wizard that you can use to bulk enable protection at the item level for your entire application. Just be aware, and I'd like to see this addressed, but when you do it, it's kind of like, as I said, it's in bulk, right? And of course, some of those settings are going to be too secure. So you're going to find that once you've done it, you got to dial a few of them back, and it's perfectly fine to do so. But the problem I see with the tool is that then, a year later, as you've added a lot more stuff, it's not like you really want to rerun that tool because it doesn't remember what you've dialed back and whatnot. I don't know if there's something that could be done about that in the future, but I feel like that wizard is really only good once, and then you have to kind of maintain it yourself, like at the item level.
Right.
So maybe there's something that could be addressed there in the future.
That's why I like VPD, because then you don't have to worry so much about manipulating URLs to see data. At least it blocks that out.
Yeah. And Joel, I had one for you actually. Has anyone run by you? Have you guys considered adding dual factor authentication as like an option in Apex out of the box?
No, I mean, sorry, I want to get to your question, but I want to address the earlier point because I'm slow. In general, people should implement security as close to their data as possible. So all these people implementing all these rules and all this security, and I'm going to hide this field from this person in my report in the Apex app, what happens when you bring across the next tool that connects via .NET or Java or Node or whatever? You have to implement exactly the same security all over again. And so I'm always a fan, and I'm sure you guys are, is that you want to push that as close to the data as possible, and then everybody wins, right?
Well
what was your question again? Oh, two-factor authentication. It's interesting. In general, Apex should not be an authentication agent, right? So that should be handled by upstream components. And as you know, Dan, we use Oracle Access Manager and Oracle Single Sign-On, and we're in the process now of moving our employee directory to the internet, and it is that upstream agent which has support for two-factor authentication. So it really shouldn't be borne by us. It should be upstream from us.
I'm with you. Fair enough.
Yeah, that's true.
And yeah, TFA is good. I've done it before. But Joel's right. The other thing about putting your rules close to your data, what happens when a consultant comes in? What happens when a new employee who doesn't know Apex or a Java developer who's transitioning to Apex doesn't go through and turn on session state protection and make sure everything is vetted properly? So getting at your data is going to outlive whatever technology that you have now and whatever comes next. When you decide to hire someone to build an iOS application, all that security is already in place. So yeah, without a doubt, that's the way to go. All right, continuing on here.
I think there's just one last kind of really detailed question in the queue, but I don't know if we should go any longer, if we should just call it here.
I want to do 30 seconds on the shadow schema question. That is becoming more and more essential, and the high level, what is a shadow schema? It's the schema you parse in that only contains the objects that are 100% essential to that application functioning. So in the example that Dan showed with showing all tables, you wouldn't be able to see anything because the shadow schema only gets to see, say, 2 views on emp and dect. You may see it in the data dictionary, but when you try to select against it, the database is always the final say. You simply can't see or execute or run anything outside of that whitelisted group of privileges. Should you use a shadow schema for every application you ever build? Probably not. There's some that you don't need that, but there are some where the requirements dictate that type of development. Yes, it takes longer. Yes, you have to build your own APIs. Yes, it's a pain, but I'll go back to that saying, security is hard. If it's easy, it's probably wrong. Which Apex version has the escape character option? That's been around since like 2 or maybe even 3.0, 3.1 allows you to escape columns. It's been in the tool for quite some time.
I prefer you would say Apex 513 is the only one that has it, so people have a sole reason to upgrade immediately, and they get all the other vulnerabilities fixed too.
I agree. There's a lot to be said for keeping current. Last one, so App Builder, disabling that in production. Absolutely, you can run a command, APEX-SERT, which is a script. I might be one letter off, but it's one of the scripts that Apex ships with. What that'll do is remove the development environment, and now you are a runtime-only environment. You can only manage Apex through a privileged user, someone who has the Apex administrator role or sys or system. You'd have to install apps through SQL Plus or SQL CL, but that last attack that both Nathan demoed at Kscope and I just showed you would be impossible because the development environment's not there. You wouldn't be able to run that type of thing. Definitely less convenient, but definitely now I think people are going to think about, maybe that runtime thing isn't such a bad idea.
And when you said at the beginning that it removes the builder, let's be clear. It removes the Apex applications, which is the builder. It removes database objects, and it reduces the privileges granted as well. So it totally reduces the attack surface of Apex.
Yep.
We good?
Yeah. Okay, then.
Excellent.
Then thanks
All right.
to all of you. And we see us in 2 weeks.
Thanks,
All right,
everybody.
guys, thank you so much
care.
for being with us. Thank you all for attending today. And part 2 of 2 will be on December 14th at 12 o'clock p.m. Eastern Time. See you then.
Thanks. See you.
Bye.
Bye.